I'm Jason with Born Handy, and in today's video we're going to go ahead and finish up one minor detail on the face frames for the Hutch cabinets that probably should have been included in the last video, but I kind of made a mistake and somehow left it out. But I did get it in the beginning of this video and we kept it pretty quick. After that, we are going to move over to the drawer boxes. Now the drawer boxes themselves look like a pretty simple thing to build, but the reality is drawer boxes are a pretty involved portion of any project. The reality also is they're absolutely worth it. So if you're trying to build a set of hutches for yourself, I'm going to encourage you to pay special attention to this portion of the build and get your drawer boxes completed. You'll thank me in the end. So now that we've got the face frame on the base cabinet, we are ready to cut the radius in the bottom that would allow us to clean up a spill in the event we had to. And so I'm going to start off by marking 3 3/4 inches in from both sides. Now I'm going to take my radius pattern, and I'm going to hold it down on those marks, and I'll draw the radius. And with that drawn, I'll use the jigsaw and I'll stay just this side of that line that I've just drawn, and then I'll come back and clean it up with a router. A little double-sided tape to hold down the pattern. The same flush trim bit as before with the ball bearing at the top of the shaft, and I'll ride that ball bearing along the pattern and allow the bit to trim the wood to match. So now we want to build the drawer box. It's going to go in the top of this cabinet, and if you've downloaded the PDF that's the cut sheet that helps you walk through this, you're going to find that there are some dimensions that are given, but don't follow those exactly because this really depends heavily on how wide our face frame material is. And although you may have bought it or cut it down to 2 inches, 2 inches from one manufacturer can be different from 2 inches from another by just a tiny little bit. What we want to do is build our drawer box so that we have exactly 1/2 inch left on either side. And so for that reason, we are going to build our drawer box a little bit differently than how I would normally do it. But in this case, this is designed to be a beginner project, and so we're going to build this the easiest way possible. So for these pieces, we're looking at 3 3/4 inch wide, and then the length is going to be determined by how wide our door is. And so when we measure and find that we are 13 7/8 inch, what we have to understand is that our drawer glides are going to need 1/2 inch on either side of the drawer in order to operate. So we're going to subtract a total of 1 inch from that measurement so that when our drawer is centered into place, we'll have 1/2 inch left on either side. And that's as easy as marking it at 12 7/8 inch and making our cut. So here are the two that I've cut out for the drawer front and the drawer back for this side. And the finished dimension is, as I said earlier, going to be 3 3/4 across. And the length is going to be 12 7/8 inch. And now onto the drawer sides. We're going to cut these down to 12 1/2 inches apiece. Coming right back to our pocket hole jig, we're going to go ahead and drill pocket holes in the drawer side to make that connection. And for me, my preference is that the pocket holes go on the outside, although I see no reason you couldn't put the pocket holes on the inside. But it is going to be easier to conceal them if they're on the outside of the drawer. And so now with both sides and the front and backs cut out and the pocket holes drilled, we're ready to assemble the framework for the drawer box. As always, it starts with a little bit of glue down the edge, and as always, I will place the drawer side in place and try to make sure everything is lined up as perfectly as is possible. Now I'll flip it over and attach the other side with the same method. And that completes the frame for the drawer box, but now we're going to need a bottom. So if you use the downloaded cut sheet, you're already going to have the dimensions given for the drawer bottom. But again, that is going to vary depending on the thickness of the material that you use. And so the instruction was given to cut these a little bit too big. The theoretical finished dimension should have been 11.5 by 12.5 inches, but because of the plywood thickness variance, we did want to go ahead and cut these a little bit bigger. So now this piece will need to be trimmed to fit neatly inside of the frame. There are a handful of ways to achieve that exact tight fit, but what I'm going to do is slide the piece in and put a mark on the far side and cut just beyond the mark because the pin can only get so close to the corner, and then I'll nibble back in toward that mark, and then I'll do the same thing for this side. I'll slide the piece just inside the rim and then put a mark on the other corner. And if I trim to this line and then to this line, very close but not quite touching the line, I can do a fit and if I need to take a little more off, I can shave off strips in very, very thin cuts until it's a tight fit. I'm going to call that good widthwise, and now I can just focus on front to back. And I believe that is going to be our answer. And now to permanently attach the drawer bottom to the drawer sides, if you thought about pocket screws, then you thought correct. So now I'm going to take the drawer bottom and I'm going to lay it bottom side down to the table. And then I'm going to take the sides of the drawer box and carefully fit it over the drawer box. And now that I have a fit that does not allow the drawer box to slide all the way through, I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the sides. And this will ensure that when the drawer bottom slides into the sides, there will be a pretty good coverage amount of glue. And when I pocket screw it in, if the screws should ever fail, we have the glue as a backup. And if the glue should ever fail, we of course have the screws as a backup. Now I'll clean off any excess glue with a wet rag. Now we're going to set this aside to dry because we're going to need to turn our attention back to our base cabinet in order to add a couple of cleats that will allow us to install our drawer box properly. Our drawer box is going to slide in and out up here, but we're going to need some way to connect our drawer glides to the sides of the cabinet. Now there are a couple of ways to do this. The first one, and probably the most common, is to buy drawer glides that have a piece that attaches to the back of the cabinet and holds the drawer glide steady. But again, as this is a beginner project, we are just going to add a wooden cleat to the inside of the box that brings the side of the cabinet flush with the face frame. That way we can screw our glides directly to that wooden cleat, and there's no need to worry about the proper alignment of any sort of mounting bracket in the back to hold our drawer glides parallel to the box. So the first thing we're going to need to know is how wide these cleats need to be in order to attach to the inside of the cabinet and bring its edge to the exact front of the face frame. And so the way we're going to do that is with a combination square. I've loosened the square, I have slid it against the panel, and at this point I'm going to tighten the nut, and I can pull it out and read that it is going to be just over 1.25 inches, maybe by about a 32nd of an inch. Probably the most common material to build this cleat with would be a 2x4 or something of that nature, but in this case I have a pretty thick piece of a material called red grandis left over from an earlier project, so I'm going to use this since it's what I have on hand. Today is Black Friday, and you're not ever going to get me to go out in this shopping just to buy a couple of 2x4s. So now comes the question of just how far down does each one of these cleats go, and that's actually pretty simple. At the end of the day, we want our drawer box to have about 1/4 inch of open space between the top of the drawer box and the bottom of the face frame here. And so since we know our drawer box is 3 3/4 inches, if we put a mark at 4 inches down, that'll give us our clearance and it'll tell us exactly where we want to put our cleats. 4 inches in, I'll do the same over here. And now I've got a good way to line it up in the front, but I need to know how to line it up in the back. And that's as simple as loosening the combination square, dropping it down until the square is even with the mark that we've just made, tighten it back up, and I can transfer that mark inside of the cabinet and know exactly where I need to be. So now I have the positioning of the cleat marked, and I need to attach the cleat permanently to the inside of the cabinet. And in order to do that, I would like to use a couple of screws. So what I want to do is to drill a pilot hole using the drill bit that's supplied with the pocket hole kit. It has a countersink and a pilot hole, and all I need to do is to mark the final depth so that I know exactly how far my screw is going to protrude out so that I can be sure that the screw doesn't come out the other side of the cabinet. Probably the easiest way to determine how deep I need to make my pilot hole is to take a scrap piece of plywood left over from when we cut this material, and then I can lay it against the cleat, place my screw at an appropriate depth, and then mark where the shoulder needs to be. Then I can take the drill bit that comes with the pocket hole set, place the shoulder at that mark, and apply a piece of tape even with the wood. And that way I can see the tape and know how deep to drill. So I've laid the cabinet over on its side. I'm going to apply a little bit of glue, and I'll apply a little bit more to the cleat itself. And then I'll place the cleat in place even with our line. Now I'll put a couple of screws, and when the glue dries, this piece will be here forever. Now I'll flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. So now I'm ready to attach this drawer glide to the side of the box. And the way I'm going to do that is to just pop the drawer glide open and go ahead and lay it down next to the drawer box. And what I want to do is connect the thinner segment to the drawer box, because the wider segment will connect to the cleats that we attached inside the cabinet a little bit earlier. So I also want to make sure that this section is far enough back from the front that a face panel won't interfere with this here. So if this were sitting a little bit too far forward, the face panel wouldn't sit flat. So I want to make sure that it's a little bit behind the front edge of the drawer box. Now I'm going to take some small screws that are small enough not to protrude all the way through the material and secure this to the drawer box. The big thing is to make sure that my glide is the same depth down as my drawer box, which is why I have the drawer box and the glide resting on the tabletop. And then last, I can slide the drawer glide all the way back, depress the lever, and remove the outer piece and put my final screw in. And that takes care of that. And now I'll do the same thing on the other side. I've attached this block temporarily that protrudes beyond the cleat, and that allows me to rest the drawer glide on top of this cleat, and this ensures that this drawer glide is level with the bottom of the cleat. And now it's time to see how we did. And there we go. And that wraps up this video, and I'll go ahead and tell you that having these drawers has been way more helpful than I could ever possibly convey, especially when you consider all of the little things that you have to have in order to keep an aquarium like this going, and having all of those things immediately at arm's length and available without turning the sump area into what amounts to a case study for an episode of Hoarders. If you are considering a build like this, drawer space is an absolute must, and the extra effort is 100% worth it. Build the drawers and you will not regret it. If you're enjoying this build series, be sure to give me a like and a subscribe, and keep an eye out for the next video where we're going to use trim work to take these cabinets from simple cabinets to an elaborate storage system. So until next time, this is Jason with Born Handy.